Hi again then guys, and welcome to another car review, of course, from the very beginning once again of the Project Gotham saga, PGR1 on the original Xbox. I'm playing it on the 360 though, and we've only got a couple of cars left. This one and one more episode, and then that will be the first game completely covered. Now of course we still have plenty of cars to talk about in the second, third and fourth game, but that will be it for the first one. So only 6 unique vehicles in this first game. It's a pretty small number really. Of course we looked at the Pajamas, the Porsche 911 GT2, the very unique Ford Focus Cosworth, and of course the Ferrari F355 Spider. Now, as you saw from the title and the thumb, of course we have the Mercedes SLK, and then finally, whenever the last episode for this first game comes out, that will be of course for the BMW Z3. Now this particular Mercedes is easily, out of the 6, the car that I was the least interested in. Not because I don't like the SLK, I am a big Mercedes fan. They used to be my favourite brand, then it changed around, and in more recent years I like them a lot more, especially after hiring a brand new A-Class from 2019 for a few days. It was a gorgeous little car, thoroughly enjoyed it, and really made me appreciate Mercedes once again. This particular vehicle though, it's just one of those cars that pops up here and there in games, especially in Gran Turismo. It's been in Gran Turismo for a long time, and so, you know, familiarity breeds contempt and all that. You don't tend to use a car as much if it's been around in every game or most of the games that you've played. In my case, playing a lot of Gran Turismo means that I don't use the SLK all that often, so when it pops up in this game, of course, alongside something like a Panos or a Porsche GT2, it's not as exciting. I mean, that goes without saying. This is one of the slower sports cars in the game, however, it has some very, very redeeming features. It's nowhere near like an AMG level machine in this form, but it is good in a small sports car sense. Certainly a more than capable rival for the Audi TT and that kind of stuff, but in the game, the single best thing by far about this car is the handling. The handling, the steering, the grip, the driver feedback, even for an original Xbox game, and certainly a game which isn't trying to be all that realistic, are really good. It's a very easy car to drive, a very forgiving one, so it's perfect for beginners, people who are newer to the game in other words. Now, as far as handling goes, the score doesn't really mirror that. They give it a 6, which in other words is actually the same as the Panos. The same as the Panos Esperante. Now that might sound good, saying that it's as good as a much more powerful car, but I actually think it deserves a much higher score than that. In fact, I might even say that this is the best handling of all 6 of the cars that I've reviewed from the first game. Now of course, it's not as quick as many of them, so you can argue that has a lot to do with it, but still, it's a very, very good car through corners. If anything, it has a little bit more understeer, whereas most of the other cars tend to oversteer. And for those who are unfamiliar with those terms, maybe you're a bit younger for instance, oversteer is basically a car that always wants to drift, put simply, and a car that has more understeer would typically be something like a front-wheel drive hot hatch, for instance. They're heavier through corners. In other words, the Mercedes is more so inclined in that direction. You could make it drift if you wanted to, but it doesn't really want to do that. It's very planted, very grippy, sometimes to a fault. The handling can be a little bit too heavy in tighter corners, but most of the time it's very good. It definitely has, in my opinion, superior handling to, for instance, the BMW Z3, which we'll look at next time. Now, in terms of acceleration, they gave it a 5. That is the lowest of all 6 of the vehicles that we've reviewed. Lower, once again, than that BMW. It's lower than the Panos, of course, the Ferrari, of course, but even the Ford. That's lower than the Ford Focus, which has a 7. So this one's considerably lower in the pecking order. It doesn't actually feel slow, though. And I think that for some drivers, you might even get better laps out of this car because of how good the cornering is. But at the end of the day, once again, it's not like it's an SLK 55 AMG, it's an SLK 230. It's only a, 2.3 litre engine, I believe that name refers to. Not exactly a huge amount of power, certainly by today's Mercedes standards, so having a 5, it's perfectly acceptable and expected. As far as top end speed, they do give it another 5, which isn't quite as bad actually, because that is the same as the BMW. They both have a 5, despite the fact that the Beamer has, of course, better acceleration, as I said. So across the board, it's interesting because they give the Z3 better scores for acceleration and handling, and although the acceleration makes sense, the handling really doesn't, because to me this is easily a better car through corners than that one is. Now of course we'll get further into the Beamer when I do review that car, But this to me is one of those vehicles where I have no doubt it will have less views on this video than most of the others, certainly compared to like a Porsche or a Panhard, but sometimes the less exciting choice is the better one. For instance, a Nissan Skyline or a Nissan GTR aren't necessarily as passionate as something like a Ferrari or a TVR. However, 9 times out of 10 a Skyline or a GTR is easier to drive and will win you more events because it is easier to drive and more dependable. So it depends what kind of driving style you want. If you want a bit more of a challenge, certainly better acceleration but more challenging handling, then go for instance, the BMW Z3. This one though is a great car if, as I said earlier, you're new to the game. If you're fresh into PGR1, jump into the Mercedes, it'll give you a good feel for the game and also give you much more forgiving handling manners through corners. Beyond that, there's not a huge amount else to say. It's an SLK from the early 2000s, so of course most of you know what you're getting into. Nothing too exciting, but kind of a nice, dependable little open-top sports car. Again, very similar in that regard to the Audi TT Quattro. Nothing face-rippingly quick, but dependable, fun, and forgiving. Overall, that's it for this review though. Of course, stick around on the channel for more. Click the playlist here on screen if you are a Project Gotham fan, because I've put all 4 of the games into one playlist. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.